Welcome to this explainer. If you've spent literally any time around education, you already know that schools are incredibly complex ecosystems. Every single year, administrators and teachers have to navigate this massive, honestly overwhelming scale of data just to figure out what's working and, well, what isn't. And on top of that, you hear all these acronyms thrown around constantly. We're talking PLPs, PDPs, PLCs, SIPs. It's a literal alphabet soup of educational planning. So, let's explore these sources together and demystify how schools actually use systematic frameworks to turn an absolute avalanche of numbers into actionable strategies that genuinely help students succeed. Okay, let's dive into this because this number right here perfectly captures why we need these systems in the first place. 10,000. If you take a moderately sized school of just 1,000 students, each of those kids comes with at least 5 demographic factors and 5 achievement factors. That means a school administrator is looking at a bare minimum of 10,000 raw data points. I mean, that is utterly staggering. It's completely unreasonable to imagine educators just aggregating or calculating all of that by hand. That mountain of information proves exactly why systematic problem solving and really clear planning frameworks are absolutely necessary. Without them, you're just drowning in data. So, how do we make sense of it all? Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The continuous improvement cycle. 2. 4 types of data. 3. Individual plans. 4. Learning communities. And 5. School improvement. We're going to zoom from the big picture cycle all the way down to the individual teacher, so you get a complete understanding of how this entire system actually connects. All right, starting with section 1, the continuous improvement cycle, which is really the beating heart of education. You can think of this continuous improvement cycle as the central engine that drives problem solving at literally every level. Whether you're looking at some massive district-wide initiative, or you're just trying to figure out why a handful of students are struggling with a math concept in one specific classroom, you're going to use this exact same cycle. It works as this endless ongoing loop. In step 1, educators identify needs by looking at data to spot any gaps. Once you crunch those numbers, you move to step 2, create a plan. This is where you develop SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And you pick research-based strategies to hit them. Step 3 is implementation, where you actually roll up your sleeves and execute those strategies. Step 4 is monitor, where you do periodic checks on your progress. And finally, step 5, begin again. Because as new data comes in, you inevitably loop right back around, analyzing the new numbers and identifying new needs. Moving right along to section 2, 4 types of data. This is the fuel for that improvement engine. And this brilliantly illustrates our first type, demographic data. Because if the continuous improvement cycle is the engine, data is absolutely the fuel. Demographic data describes the makeup of a population of people. We're talking about slices of the pie like race, ethnicity, gender, English language learner status, special education, and socioeconomic status. Knowing the demographic makeup of your student population is absolutely crucial. Why? Because it forms the baseline for interpreting all the other trends in the school. You simply can't understand the nuances of student performance if you don't first understand who your students actually are. Next up, we have process data. This tracks the actual processes, programs, and instructional frameworks of a school over time. It could be tracking student participation in after-school clubs, or, like the usage trends we see here, looking at how instructional technology is utilized across the fall, winter, and spring. Analyzing process data really helps teachers optimize their efforts. For instance, if your process data shows that parents and students attend after-school activities mostly on Tuesdays, well, you can capitalize on that. You schedule your most important community events on the most popular day. Make sense, right? The third type is perception data, which captures people's opinions. Essentially, it's what they think they know. This usually comes from surveys, like this parent survey on school climate using a classic Likert scale. It gathers opinions on stuff like whether the school is clean, if the students feel safe, or if teachers communicate well. Perception data is incredibly valuable because, in a school community, how people feel about the environment directly, and I mean directly, impacts how they engage with it. The fourth and final type is the big one, achievement data. This tells you how well students have actually performed. We're talking standardized test scores, classroom grades, formative assessments, Lexile scores. What's really important here is that when we take this achievement data and disaggregate it, meaning we break it down into those demographic subgroups we talked about earlier, we can clearly see if our current teaching strategies are actually working for everyone or just for certain pockets of students. Section 3, individual plans. Let's finally clear up PLPs versus PDPs. Now that we know exactly how data feeds the improvement cycle, let's untangle some of that confusing alphabet soup, starting with the Professional Learning Plan, or PLP. This is a really exciting, proactive, self-directed goal plan for all educators. A teacher basically reviews their own classroom data and selects a goal they want to achieve. As the professional insights remind us, yes, teachers absolutely need to develop their weaknesses, but they should also be building their strengths. Nothing builds a teacher's confidence quite like becoming an expert in a specific area, and the PLP gives them the dedicated space to be that lifelong learner.
So the crucial point is contrasting that with the Professional Development Plan, or PDP. This is an administrator-developed corrective remediation plan. It's a mandated step when a teacher's practice is unfortunately struggling and negatively impacting their evaluation, like if they're scoring below proficiency levels. It is corrective for sure, but it's really important to remember that it's intended to set clear expectations and provide the actual resources and support a teacher desperately needs to grow and improve.
To really lock in this difference, let's look at the teacher on the left. Let's call her Tara. She's on a PLP. She proactively aimed to increase her standardized test scores by 5% and chose to implement a weekly clicker system to gather formative data. She's completely driving her own learning. Now contrast that with the teacher on the right, Tony, who's on a PDP. He was required by administration to complete a 20-hour classroom management course, observe his peers, and keep a weekly journal because he was struggling in the classroom. Tara's plan is self-driven growth. Tony's plan is mandated remediation. Section 4, Learning Communities, or PLCs. Now we're zooming out from the individual to the small group level. A professional learning community, a PLC, is simply a group that meets regularly to examine data with one shared purpose in mind: improving student outcomes. Whether they're organized by a specific grade level, like all the third-grade teachers, or by a content area, like the entire high school math department, the PLC is where teachers collaboratively digest all that data we've been talking about. It's where they create common assessments and really plan out their lessons together. When a PLC meets, they typically follow a very methodical 5-step structure. Step 1 is content alignment. They unpack the standards so everyone is on the exact same page about the required depth of knowledge. Step 2 is teaching practices, where they actually plan the lessons. Step 3 involves reviewing student work using specific protocols. Step 4 is data analysis of their common assessments. And Step 5 is reflection, where they look honestly at the strengths and challenges of the past unit and adapt for the next one. A truly fascinating and honestly critical task in this step is analyzing student work. When PLCs do this, they have to ask some pretty hard guiding questions. Things like, which student's work is actually good enough? And what does good enough even mean in this specific context? What do struggling students actually need? Was my teaching strategy effective? And crucially, for whom was it ineffective? By systematically asking these questions, the team generates the formal formative data they need to design upcoming lessons that ensure all learners have a real chance to succeed. But hey, let's be real for a second. As the source material points out, the feedback process can be super intimidating at first. Giving and receiving peer feedback in these small groups can trigger some deep insecurities. The person giving feedback might be terrified of hurting a colleague's feelings, while the person receiving it can just feel highly uncomfortable and judged. It requires a whole lot of vulnerability to sit with your peers and admit that, a teaching strategy just completely fell flat. And that is exactly why effective feedback protocols are so essential. Structured protocols remove the fear from the feedback by setting really clear rules. You choose a specific area to examine, you set strict time limits, and you always include time for clarifying questions. I especially love the brilliant, non-threatening phrasing used here, delivering cool feedback for areas of improvement and warm feedback for behaviors the teacher should keep repeating. It creates this safe space that actually inspires deep reflection instead of immediate defensiveness. Finally, Section 5, the school improvement process. The big picture. Let's move to and see how this all builds together. We've gone from the course cycle, to the data, to the individual teacher, and the small PLC groups. Now watch how this shapes the entire School Improvement Plan, or SIP. The SIP aligns those broad goals with the school's ultimate vision. Schools assemble diverse teams, essentially forming a massive macro-level school improvement PLC, to apply that continuous improvement cycle to the whole building. And teachers are completely integral to this. They aren't just following orders from the top down. They hold great influence over setting the goals and determining exactly what resources, training, and supports the whole community needs to thrive. Which brings us to the end of our journey today, and it leaves us with one final crucial question to think about. How will you apply the continuous improvement cycle today? Because whether you're a teacher drafting a PLP, a principal reviewing perception data, or a parent just wanting to understand your school's vision, this endless loop of identifying needs and taking action, it never stops. The tools are right in front of you. Take this understanding of these frameworks, jump into that alphabet soup, and actively participate in the continuous improvement of education. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.